Good evening. We're going to call the meeting to order, committee of a whole, as a whole, January 9th, 2014. Happy New Year, everyone. Roll call, Mrs. Campbell.
Mr. Hannigan?
Here.
Mrs. Hines?
Here.
Mr. Derman?
Here.
Mr. Loop?
Here.
Mr. Harrell?
Here.
Mrs. Tipton?
Here.
Mr. Jeter?
Here.
Mrs. Seeley?
Here.
Mr. Betancourt?
Here.
Mr. Womack?
Here.
Mr. Panks?
Here.
Mr. Lamar?
Here.
Mr. Alford?
Here.
Mrs. Bellisario? Mrs. Mullet?
Present. Thank you, Mrs. Campbell. Would everybody join me in standing for the invocation and pledge of allegiance led by Mr. Alfred?
Dear Heavenly Father, bless each and every one of us that's here today so that we can start year 2014 on a wonderful beginning. And be with us so we have a safe year. Make sure that all of our teachers and our students do the best of their ability to perform in your will. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We did not have anyone requesting time on the agenda, so we're going to move to item number 5, approval of minutes for the committee as a whole meeting held on December 5th, 2013. And do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Mrs. Hines and second by Mr. Betancourt. Any questions from board members? Comments from the public? All those in favor? All those opposed? All those abstain? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 6 is instruction. Okay, we have Mrs. Araby with Quality Assurance Review Process. Mrs. Araby.
Good evening. Tonight I will be sharing a review of the process that our district has in place to ensure that standards are being met at each of our schools. You've probably heard us say quality assurance reviews, or QARs, is what we talk about very often in the C&I department. Our quality assurance visits are where we visit our schools on a rotation basis. Each year, a district team visits 15 to 20 schools, which is on a rotation schedule. Our goal is always at the end of 5 years that we have been on a quality assurance, a formal quality assurance visit at each school. The teams consist of curriculum specialists, your curriculum supervisors, special ed specialists, curriculum specialists, coordinators, and me. The individuals are chosen based on their specialties and certainly on the grade levels at the schools. The visit aligns with our St. Tammany Parish School Board strategic plan and the advanced ed standards for individualized school improvement. And when I am reporting our strategic plan results, which next month will be our update for that, much of the information that we get at our schools is gathered and put together, and that's a lot of the data that you see at these meetings. There's a pre-visit, and this is when the supervisor meets with the principal to prepare documents to ensure that it is a productive visit. This also is a time with the supervisor able to meet with the principal to make them feel comfortable, especially if it is their very first visit. Many documents are gathered. The principal always gets us a map of the school, a master schedule, a bell schedule, and any other important information. This information we do put into a binder, and it is given to each of the committee members for them to look at. We also, before we go on our visits, the members of the committee spend a lot of time learning more about the school. We do look at their school improvement plan. We also will look at their trend data with the standardized test with DIBELS and any specialty programs that that school may have. Also, it's the time for the administrator to share with us some of the concerns that they may have, some of the things that they may want us to dig deep into, and then as well as even if there may be a concern with how they have their special ed design program made up, this is a great time for us to go in as we're visiting the school and to dig deep. The day of the visit, we have interviews, and those interviews continue with a lot of the stakeholders. It always begins with the principal, and that's with the whole committee. I typically lead the interview with questions that have to do or are very much related to school improvement, and from the rubric, the leadership rubric that we use as we're making our observations on the administrators around our district. We also interview a group of teachers. This is a group of teachers that are selected by the principal. A lot of times these will be your grade level chairs, and certainly you always have your special ed teacher represented as well. And there's another interview that's done with parents, stakeholders, community members. And this is a committee that's pulled together where it's a great time for us to look and visit at that community connection. Gives us an opportunity to see how they're involved at their school. And at the high school level, we do have a student group that we visit with at that time. Classroom observations are done throughout this visit. These would be our learning walks. And typically, we have one group of people doing the interviews and then another group that's walking around campus. And then we alternate with that. I always do the learning walks after we interview the principal, and I do that with the supervisor of that school. This is a great time for us to ask those deep questions. We walk into the classroom. It's a formal learning walk. It's a time for us to step out in the hall, and then we have that conversation about what did you see in the classroom. And it's a great time for that principal to be able to ask us questions as well. Typically, they want to know what was it that you saw, what were you looking for in the way of engagement in the classroom. Following the interviews and the learning walks, and typically this is about a 3-hour visit at the school, we do come back to the table as a committee. We kind of pull all of our comments, and from that we do give verbal feedback to the principal at that time. We certainly always have some commendations, some very positive comments to make, and then we also have some recommendations. And I will tell you that every single principal, what they're looking for are the recommendations that we can give them. What is it that you saw that I can do or we can do to improve student achievement at our school? There is a post-visit, and at the post-visit, a PowerPoint is provided for the faculty. This is a piece that we added about 2 or 3 years ago, and the PowerPoint actually has all of the domains from the rubric that is used for the leadership evaluation. It gives commendations, recommendations, and certainly support. It's a great time for us to be able to put some of the spotlighting events that we saw on our visit, and the PowerPoint is for the principal to be able to deliver back to her faculty. And we have found that it's about a 3-week turnaround, and we know that the faculty, it's very important for them to see that there were results. It wasn't just that we came and took a little walk and left, that we really, on that visit, we really left some information and we had some very positive comments to make. There's also a written document, which is what we're able to give to the principal, which has an analysis of the school data as well as an analysis of the visit. And this is an important document that we keep electronically because we'll have all this ready as we're preparing for our advanced ed visit, which I shared with you earlier, which will be sometime next year. Collaboration is what we see as one of the best and most important outcomes. A lot of times our curriculum specialists or some of our special ed people that are included in these visits, it's given them an opportunity to really get into that instructional world in the schools and in the classrooms and beginning to form those relationships. It's also allowing principals to see others that they can rely on as far as support for their school. School supervisors visit the schools on a regular basis. That's one thing certainly in the C&I department that you will see. Not our people very much in their office except on their duty day, but for the most part they are out and about in the schools for more than 2/3 of the day. We know that in St. Tammany Parish, that as we're developing our school improvement plans, that we know that it may need to look a little bit different from school to school. And sometimes that additional support may be required at some of our schools. Supervisors lead learning walks with administrative teams. Our principals a lot of times would like their assistant principals to be there, as well as those TRTs, department heads, even some of maybe their newer teachers that are at the school so that they can get about into the classrooms and be a part of that conversation. District personnel works directly with faculty for professional development. That's another thing that we're able to leave from our quality assurance visit is we're digging deep. We may come up with some ideas in the way of professional development that can be left for the school for them to use, but not only a plan, but the people that they can rely on in being able to deliver that plan at the school. Now, you know, in St. Tammany, we always do things a little bit more digging deeper. And what we do know in some of our schools that have really asked for that additional help, it may be a new administrator at a school, it may be a school performance score that they really have concerns about. And so we do have a very formal district plan that we put into place. And this plan at some of our schools would look like in the past where 3 supervisors may be assigned to that particular school. They do a lot of research. They look at their data. They look at the trend data over 3 to 5 years. They also look into their discipline data and look to see what may be the reasons that the students are out of the classroom. And very important, the connection to the community. Has that school made a very good connection with the community? And are they relying on those resources that they may have available? In the past, these 3 supervisors will be on that campus a separate day during the week, but each of them will have a half day where they will go to that school. In the past, we've had Julie Mott, who with the instructional information that she has in the way of technology and instruction, she would be on that campus for a half day and walk with the administrator and other team members that they may have wanted to be on those learning walks, and they would talk about the instruction. The visibility of central office being on that campus is where we have found we have gotten the biggest gains. Another individual that we have used is Amy Woosner, was very involved in the way of discipline and looking at the data. She was able to crunch those numbers, meet with the principal, and then really determine where were the gaps and maybe some of those teachers not following through on their behavior plan and what more needed to be done to keep the kids in the classrooms. And then, as always, blending our departments, we had Dorable, who also attended with this team, and she was there to make sure that that community connection was really getting the biggest gains by using the people in that community. These 3 individuals visited the school a half day each during that week, so they were very visible, and the teachers saw them, the community saw them, the students saw them, and parents were very aware how active we were in the growth of that school. We now have this same plan in place at 2 of our elementary schools this year, and we know that the results of that will be great. On the other hand, it's also a great learning lesson for us and central office to making sure that we're keeping our connection with that instructional environment of being in the school and being in the classroom. And it also allows us to see that some of the professional development we're providing to our administrators is also rolling out, and we're able to make sure that that's being done. It allows us to learn. It allows us to know what we need to do better. And as always, the most important part of this is we know as a school system that we need to reach every child every day, and working together and collaboratively through our quality assurance visits, we know that we're doing it right in St. Tammany. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Araby. Board members, do we have any questions for Mrs. Araby? I'll start, Mr. Alfred, and then Mr. Hennigan.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Araby, that was a great presentation. I was looking at trying to connect all the pieces together here. This is a 5-year period where you take 15 schools. Each year it's 15 of our schools that you're going to do this review on. And you're going to have recommendations that you give to each one of those schools. Year number 2, do you get something back from the schools to let them know that they're responding to your recommendations? Year number 3 and year number 4, before you get back to the school in the fifth year.
And
what happens during that period?
well, each school has a C&I supervisor that is very involved at their school. And that C&I supervisor will still be on that campus the next year. It just won't be that you'll have the full committee from the visit that we're making. And I say typically we do 15 to 17 schools. I know one year I ran us a little ragged and we did 20 schools that year. But I will say that we may plan for that number of schools, but if there's ever a sense of urgency or an emergency at a school where they want us to come in, then we will add that school and rearrange the schedule. The goal is by the end of the 5-year mark that we would have done a full quality, at least one full quality assurance visit within the 5-year period.
Okay, Mr. Hennigan.
Yes, thank you, Cheryl. Great presentation. I'm glad you're doing this. I guess I'd like to understand, though, you do some analysis and present it to the school, but that doesn't, it's not in lieu of doing similar types of analysis and rollouts all throughout the year, right? You make reports available to them.
That's
And-
correct.
yeah.
And what I would say is what our goal is we review that trend data, the 3 to 5 year trend data for us. And I will tell you, sometimes we have found gaps or things that we've identified at that time, which allows us to assist that principal. But you're absolutely right. The reviewing of the data and looking at the different marks in the student growth is going on
All the time.
all the time. But I will say with this formal visit, it's the visibility, it's that collaboration, the building of relationships with the principals.
Yeah, okay, good. Thank you.
Mr. Betancourt.
Thank you. Ms. Araby, the first part, the day of the visit, it talks about interviews with parents and stakeholders. How is that group assembled? Is that people invited or?
Yes, typically what you will see is the group of parents is invited by the principal. You're typically going to see your PTA president or one of the people from the PTA. We do ask them to have a varied group, to certainly include maybe a parent of a special ed student, because you want to hear from a variety of individuals and services that are provided for their children. And I will say that the principal typically wants to have that group where it's not going to always maybe be that parent that you know has been happy for every single day in the school, because they want us to come back with some recommendations for them. They want us to dig deep. But that group of parents is set up by the principal.
So like 4 happy, 1 unhappy, or something like that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Loop.
Hopefully, you may be able to answer this off the top of your head there, Cheryl. What, a commendation and a recommendation that occurs quite often when you do visit our schools, something that we know, you almost always see as a commendation or a recommendation from doing these?
A commendation would be one where we see engagement at a high level with the students, and typically the indicators for that would be where if you saw the students sitting in groups and conversing and collaboration. Another commendation may be in the way of technology, because we're very clear that we want to see the technology in the hands of the students. So it would be if we really saw that technology, that Promethean board being used by the students, that would be a commendation. We always, for the most part, and any principal who sees this would say yes, would be differentiation instruction is always in the area of recommendation for the schools. On occasion, we're seeing that in a much more effective way in the classrooms, but it's being able to provide for all of the students and differentiating, not just for your struggling students or at-risk students, but for those students on the higher end. So that would be a recommendation. And with each of those, with the commendation and recommendation, we always include indicators. It's not about just saying it, but here might be some suggestions.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other board members? Mrs. Seeley.
Thank you. Does this include like OSHA standards also, or safety issues when you go out on this visit?
Yes, of course, certainly we do comment on routines and procedures, which especially at our elementary schools that would have a lot to do with safety. I will tell you we're not going to check for all of the doors being locked. Certainly if you see a concern, if you see maybe some hazards that would need to be addressed, it's not unusual for us to mention that to the principal and then come back and get with Mr. Jabbia with any concerns of that sort.
But we do have team of administrative supervisors that are assigned their schools to look at that and visit those. The administrative supervisors, as well as our 2 security coordinators, are assigned schools that they do security audits, if you will, on a regular basis, more like the curriculum side, the administrative side of that.
Okay, seeing no further question. Any comments or questions from the public? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Mrs. Araby. That was wonderful. Meeting adjourned.
All right, folks, we're going to call this committee as a whole meeting for the St. Tammany Parish School Board, January 9th, 2014, for Business Affairs and Administration to order. Roll call, please. Ms. Campbell.
Mr. Durman? Mr. Hennigan? Mrs. Heinz? Mr. Loop? Mr. Harrell? Mrs. Tipton? Mr. Jeter? Mrs. Seeley? Mrs. Mullet? Mr. Betancourt? Mr. Womack? Mr. Panks? Mr. Lamarck? Mr. Alfred? Mrs. Belisario?
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. We're going to dispense with the invocation and Pledge of Allegiance, as that was just done. And I do not think we have anyone signed up for time on the agenda because the paper's going. So we're going to move right along into approval of the minutes for the committee as a whole meeting held December 5th, 2013. Do I have a motion? Moved by Ms. Seeley, second by Ms. Mullet. Any questions by board members? Any questions by the public? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? Abstain? So ordered. Number 5 is consideration of a policy as per Act 87 of the 2013 legislative session. Is that going to be Mr. Jabbia?
Thank you, Mr. Durman. Just as a side note, when I took over this position, I knew of a lot of the responsibilities that I had, and as I'm going along, I'm learning more of the responsibilities that I have and going to be monitoring these situations. And this is one of the new ones here. This is a policy through the Louisiana legislative session that we have to adopt, requiring schools to provide certain accommodations for employees to express breast milk. We've sent this to you in advance. Like to see if you have any questions rather than reading the policy. If you'd like for me to read it, I'd be glad to. This meets all the requirements of Act 87.
Yes, we do need a motion. Moved by Ms. Heinz, seconded by Ms. Jack Loop. Any questions or comments from board members? Ms. Pellicerio.
I really haven't had a chance to read this over, but is this going to involve us doing some renovations to facilities to
No, it's
create spaces?
no additional cost to the school system.
Really?
We have to use the existing facilities that we have,
Oh, okay.
and we'll
Thank
work
you.
with the principals on
Okay.
that.
Any other questions by board members? Members of the public? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? So ordered.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr. Chairman.
Jabbia, thank you. You did that very well. We're going to move on into the next section of administrative. Mr. Jabbia.
Yes, sir. The monthly maintenance and custodial report is in your packet. Mr. Singletary is here with his staff if you have any questions.
Any questions by board members? I got one just off the top of my head because of the cold weather. Do we have any major issues at any of our school locations or anything?
We did not. The only issue that we had was that the town of Abita lost water, so that we were under a boil water advisory for a while. That was the only problems that we had. We had a few problems with some buses being able to be get cranked the next morning because of the temperature. But other than that, everything went very, very well.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Jabbia, next monthly risk management report.
Yes, the monthly risk management report is in your packet. Mr. Gaspard is here. In addition, we put something at your place tonight. It's some trend data that the board requested at the last committee as a whole. And what we wanted to do was to be able to, and we just got this finished, or we would have gotten to you ahead of time. We'd like to give you some time to review that material, absorb it, and we want to come back at the February committee as a whole and make a full report regarding this information. I'd also like to ask the board members, look at the data, look at the way it's put together. If you have any suggestions or comments you'd like to make, please give me a call or Mr. Gaspard, and we can see what we can do for you as putting that together.
And our plan is actually to have this as an agenda item at the February meeting. We just wanted to give it to you now, give you some time to digest it, ask questions, get input, and then we will make it as agenda item for Mr. Gaspard and Mr. Jabbia.
And we want to make sure it was
present.
information that you wanted.
Correct.
That this is what you wanted.
And if there's
not,
something
we need to
extra
know.
you'd like to see, please make us aware of that as well.
Right.
Okay, I appreciate that. So with that in mind, we have no real discussion unless you got a pertinent question to it immediately.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, no, Kurt, on the, one of the last page where it says total school incidents, you just want to let us know what that includes.
I think that's in the regular report. Huh? Which one are you talking about? You're talking about the regular monthly report? Oh, no, that one.
That one,
okay.
no, the new one, you, total school incidents, just curious as to what that included.
That's the workers' comp.
904 last
Okay.
year.
You talking about with the general of
Incidents for the most part, Mr. Wood,
Okay.
that occur at campus.
For the, or at campuses for the entire 2013 year that we, okay, that's what I need to know. Thank you.
Any other questions or any other comments? All right. Thank y'all very much. And we didn't going to take any action on that, so we'll move on into the monthly transportation report.
Yes, sir, and the monthly transportation report is in your packet also, and Ms. Amy is here with her staff if you have any questions.
Any questions or comments from board members? Seeing none. Moving on, I guess we're going to go to the, Mr. Jabbia, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, appreciate it.
To the construction, Ms. Tipton.
you. This evening, I want to just give you a quick review. In your packet tonight is a little bit different, a monthly report. We gave you just an overview snapshot of the construction status report for the 18 projects that were included as a part of the bond issue that passed in May, so that you could see that we've been to every school so far and met with the principal or their design team with the architect and engineers to get an initial startup on all of the projects. Following the architect selection that was approved by this board in October, we met with Mr. Folse and Assistant Superintendent Cheryl Araby and Pete Jabbia and discussed the projects, and the direction that came from that was that we would prioritize by going with the modular replacement projects and the infrastructure projects first, and then to move into the additions and the renovations, and that's the way that we have proceeded, but we have gotten to all schools here before school ended in the first semester. We've had follow-up meetings at several locations for programming and some schematic design, and we've got surveys and soil borings underway at some locations too. So we're moving all the projects along as quickly as possible. It does take some time for the design teams to review the project scopes, determine the school-specific design considerations, and then to produce the documents that go out for bid and ultimately are followed for the construction. The process for each project generally is going to take a number of months, but we will be following that with you and giving you updates as we go. We are anticipating at the February meeting that we're going to have some site plans to include and to be able to start going over each of the jobs with you as we go forward. And we'll begin to have better ideas of schedules for bidding and construction to share with you. We're also working on the planned summer projects. They're moving along well. We're beginning to see some review sets. We're planning to start advertising some of those for bid. We're going to be bringing bids to the March and April board meetings for the summer work. Some of those projects include Bayou Lacombe, some re-roofing, a gym floor replacement at Boyette, some other re-roofing at Covington Elementary, Folsom Elementary, and Lee Road. We'll also be doing a track resurfacing at Mandeville High, some re-roofing at St. Tammany Junior. We're going to continue the re-roofing phases at Slidell High School this summer, and some re-roofing at Slidell Junior where the pupil appraisal is. Next month, we'll be going back to our monthly report format where we'll show each of these jobs, and you can see those better.
I just want to say, if I could, Mr. Dermott, this is the process and the part that seems to go the slowest, but it's really some of the most important part of work that we do is to make sure that we have everything in place. We had always talked about the input from the people, the stakeholders at the individual schools, and that's a part of this process as well. So once we get all that done, it will pick up a little bit, but just to use a construction term, if you don't set a good foundation, then you certainly will not be able to have good projects. So I know this has been work that has gotten Cameron and Sammy into the schools a lot, and I know I've heard good feedback from principals about how the process has worked, and they feeling really good about the projects and the outcome that will come from this.
Thank you, Mr. Folse. Ms. Tipton, thank you. Any questions from the board? Mr. Alford.
Cameron, this is just for clarification for me. Under the modular classrooms, and when you do say if you, at any one of them, when you replace a wing, what's that process? You have to remove the wing out, and during the summertime, you replace it and be ready for school the following, for the August, September time period? Or is it longer than that?
It will be much longer than that. In the case of the modular classrooms, we will be building conventional construction classrooms.
Conventional. Oh, okay.
To replace the modulars. In each case, we're going to each school and we're looking at the best location for that new wing. In some cases, we will have to bring in some temporary classrooms so that they can vacate the modulars, because we'll be building in the same location as those modular wings. In some cases, we're going to be able to build in a different location on the school site and use the current modulars as their temporary classrooms, so to speak. And then after the new wing is built, we'll be able to tear down the modular and put it back as playground or whatever it may need to be used for, parking or what have you. So that's the process that we're looking at with regard to those projects.
That cleared that up for me. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions by board members? Seeing none. Ms. Tipton, again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on now to the next item is business affairs. Ms. Fortenberry.
The purchasing report is in your packets, and Mr. Stevens is here to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions by board members for Ms. Stevens? Seeing none. Ms. Fortenberry, thank you. Moving on, announcements from the president. Ms. Heinz.
Thank you, Mr. Derman. Mr. Loop asked me to announce that the livestock show will be held at the Covington Fairgrounds on January 18th, 4 p.m. for a dinner and then the auction to follow. The regular board meeting will be held on Thursday, January 16th at 7 p.m. A special board meeting for the purpose of expulsion hearings will be held on Thursday, January 23rd at 7 p.m. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And with that, that concludes our meeting, so we're adjourned. Thank you very much.